Hi everyone, welcome to Thoughts for Change Makers LinkedIn Live, where we challenge the status quo, elevate performance, and foster exponential growth. Welcome to the show. And today, let me introduce Anna Glynn. So, Anna is a speaker, educator, and coach on thriving workplaces. With over a decade of experience in the corporate sector, including leading national sales teams, Anna translates this latest research into relatable and practical strategies that empower people and performance to thrive. And so, in her practice, Anna has worked with global teams across various industries, teaching them what leads to greater engagement, resilience, well being, and performance at work. And what is the most exciting thing about Anna? She is soon to be an author next year, and she will talk more about that. So, welcome, Anna. I always like to ask one quick question before we delve into your topic. I'm curious, what is the definition of individual performance in your opinion?
Very good. Great question to begin with. And thank you for having me on the show, and very much looking forward to this conversation, Lizon. So we'll get into it straight away. And you've started with a great one. So I think first off, I always have a little bit of a problem with that whole idea of defining performance. So for me, it's one of those concepts that we talk a lot about performance, obviously in organizations and with teams and with the individuals that I work with, but it's one of those things that is hard to define. So in that way, it's kind of a bit of a nebulous concept in that way. I think for many people, and those particularly in sales, so I know a lot of the people joining this session will be from a sales area, they probably think about performance as that dollar value. And that makes it easier for people in those sorts of roles to actually track and to see, well, how am I going if there is that sort of dollar currency attached to it. But for other parts of the organizations and for people in other roles, it actually can be quite hard to define if they don't sort of have that sales figure attached to their position. So that's where they might be thinking about performance in terms of their productivity or, customer satisfaction, or maybe it's about being more efficient, or maybe it's about innovations of some kind. So in that way, it can be quite subjective, which is why I do struggle sometimes with that term performance, and certainly high performance, which I know so many organizations are focused on.
Yes, and that's why I love to ask this question, because we never hear the same answer.
It's probably a problem, isn't it? If so many of us are focused on performance, how are we each actually defining what it is?
Yes. So hi, we have people saying hello. So welcome. So by the way, we have a rule here, is that I'm not the only one that can ask questions to Anna. So if you have any questions, thoughts, comment, please pop them into the chat. Like that, we know we are not only the two of us, but we know we are more people here. So now let's get into this topic. What are the 6 essential skills for sales success, in your opinion?
Very good. Thank you. So I guess firstly, I want to define that idea of success, because just as we spoke about success, for me, absolutely there is a performance element. We want to be, achieving the outcomes that we set out. But I think there's much more to it. So for me, success is equated with things like thriving. And I describe thriving as when we are engaged. So when we are deeply connected to our work, we are really interested in it, we love showing up, and we can be at our best each day. So that's sort of that engagement element. I think what's also really important, and also forms part of our success, is that we need to be able to deal with the pressures that we face and the challenges that we're thrown. In a sales role, we know that sales teams in particular face more knockbacks and setbacks, perhaps, than anyone else in organizations. So they need to be able to cope well with those challenges. But also there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on them to succeed. And that comes a lot from sort of that top down, where you've got your senior leaders, your CEOs that are obviously wanting you to perform well when you're in sales, because the livelihood of the organisation and the life of the organisation actually depends on how you go. So you need to be able to deal with that. On top of that, I think the success also comes from people that do have great wellbeing. So when we talk about wellbeing in this way, it's about that physical and mental wellbeing. So it is about, having strong connections with people around you, having a really clear understanding of meaning and what brings you purpose in your life as well. So there's some of the things that I actually that I associate with wellbeing. So my definition of success is that when people are engaged, when they're resilient, and when they're well, which ultimately actually leads to better performance. So in answer to your question then of how we actually achieve those things, that's where those 6 skills come into play. So these 6 particular skills of what I've uncovered through my own experiences, but then through the studies that I've gone on and completed, these are what have come out of research from sales team around what leads them to thrive. Lucky for me, and maybe for the rest of you, I was very pleased when they actually spelt out this acronym STRONG. So there's 6 elements that make up the STRONG model. And my suggestion is that if we focus on these 6 skills, we will be able to thrive as a sales team.
Should I share the slide? Because I know I have a slide.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Let's dive into STRONG.
Perfect. So I know some people are probably going to be more visual learners, so I think it is good to highlight a STRONG here. So as I start to explain it a bit more, we can actually visually see exactly what I'm talking about. So as I said, these particular elements of what have come from research from areas like positive psychology, and certainly from my own experience when I've applied these with teams, we've seen some really great outcomes. So the first, the S, actually stands for strengths. So what we know is that when sales teams play to their strengths, they're actually able to be more engaged in their work. We also know that performance improves when we focus on our strengths as opposed to our weaknesses. So we've all heard of that concept of kind of playing to your strengths before, but unfortunately there's a few challenges that get in the way of us actually being successful with this strategy. So it does take a bit of a mindset shift for us actually to be able to play to our strengths. But this is also part of what helps us bring on those feelings of flow. So if anyone on the call has actually experienced flow, which is that feeling of being in the zone or one with the music, it's often something that's spoken about on the sporting field. Typically, when we experience those moments of flow, we are playing to our strengths. And this is when we are at our most engaged and performing at our best. So we absolutely want our teams to be doing that.
And can you give an example of a strength in a sales team? Like, what does it look like? What type of strengths are we talking about?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of strengths, is that they are all, I guess there's a whole range of different strengths that we can bring. And that's the beauty of strengths, is that we're not asking people to fit into a certain box. We're actually asking them to bring their best self to that situation. So for an area like sales, we need to be good at dealing with people and connecting with people and building relationships with people. But every salesperson will do that in a slightly different way. So that's when they might bring that uniqueness to the position. So it might be that you're actually a person that really loves getting into those deep connections with people. So you're very much about, deepening relationships, and they're relationships that you actually build over the long term. There might actually be people that go into relationships more with that compassion style, trying to understand people's problems and solving them in that way. So they're similar in the outcomes they achieve. It's just that people might use different ways of actually building that relationship, which is attributed to their strengths.
And it made me think as well, like most of the time, sales team, you would have like the business development side, like more like a hunter, and then the key account manager that are more like kind of farming. I don't really like those words, but like, and do you see out there that people are really playing at their strengths as well, according to maybe their role?
Well, that's the hope. So the hope is that people are able to play to their strengths. But what we know, unfortunately, is that not everyone is. So a lot of questions that I ask of teams is things like, tell me what lights you up about your role. Like what are you doing when you're at your best? And if people can answer that and they can start to, if that's something that they seem to be doing more regularly, that's probably going to suggest to me that they're in a role that fits. On the other hand, sometimes I engage with people and they might tell me about, the things that are actually draining them about their role. And those activities are actually what they spend the majority of their time doing. And so that to me suggests that that person isn't playing to their strengths, and they're probably using more things like their weaknesses or their learned behaviours to try and do their job. So they wouldn't be experiencing a lot of flow. They wouldn't be engaged, and they're certainly not at their best each day. So that's where we need to try and understand, well, what is that person's strengths and what is the job that might best suit them? So they're probably a great employee, but they're just in the wrong position. This is an idea that's spoken about. It's called job crafting. So it's a bit like, the difference between buying a suit just off the peg. So you go into a shop and you just buy a suit and it can kind of fit, versus actually getting a tailor-made suit. So the idea of job crafting is that we're actually aligning roles and responsibilities of jobs according to people's strengths, so they're at their best.
Yeah, and I know the notion, but I'm not seeing it implemented a lot out there. So I think it's a great one. Yeah, like definitely. So job crafting is a really good one. And I feel as well sometimes it's like maybe the employee should not wait for the company to say, let's do some job crafting, but could they be more as well going there and say, okay, this is my strengths and this is what I'm good at, and maybe that could be my new job description now, because this is what I can bring to the organization.
Oh, absolutely. Whenever I work with people that are, perhaps looking for new opportunities, or they're not that satisfied in their roles, that's the first thing we look at is, well, what are the things that light you up? Are you doing them enough? If not, is there another position that you might be able to move into so you can play more of those?
Okay, thank you, Anna. So now let's go into the T.
So this is another big one. I mean, they're all big, according to me, in terms of how important they are for sales teams. But T stands for trust and psychological safety. So this speaks a lot to the relationships that sales teams or sales individuals need to have with the people around them. And here, I don't just want to focus on the relationships that salespeople have with clients, because obviously they are particularly important for their success. But here we also want to consider the relationships that people have around them. So those that might be in their direct team, but also, the other people in the organisation that actually support them. So the first element is the trust piece. And trust is something that actually exists on a one-to-one basis. So it's something that you have with another individual. And trust is one of those things that is, it can be hard to build, but it's something that can be very quickly eroded. And it comes a lot through not just our words, but certainly our actions as well. So we need to have those trusting relationships. I think particularly in a sales environment where maybe in the past we used to, be in cutthroat environments where we were kind of pitted against one another to try and outperform one another, that probably wasn't a way to build trust. Now we know that we need to be working, together for us all to succeed. The second part of that is this idea of psychological safety. And this is a term that certainly has risen, and a concept that's risen over the past couple of years. And that's probably thanks to, projects that have existed out there at places like Google and Atlassian, where there's been lots of research done into, well, what leads to these greater performing teams? What leads to high performance in these organizations? And certainly one of the most famous projects, which was Project Aristotle, that came out of Google, what came about from the studies that they were doing there is that nothing or no demographic, so things like age or gender or years of experience, was actually correlated with higher performance. So what it actually came down to is that they noticed that the higher performing teams actually had one thing in common, which was this idea of psychological safety. And psychological safety is something that exists across multiple individuals. So it's something that might actually be embedded throughout your culture. And this is one where we would see teams that, you know, they're able to voice their opinions, they're able to share their ideas, you know, without that fear of feeling like a failure or fear of, you know, judgment of some kind. In sales teams, these are probably the teams where, you know, you're not running two different CRMs where you've got one that you show your boss and your colleagues, and then you've got your own other one that's probably private, which I know happens for some people. So psychological safety is it's part of you know, creating a learning culture. So if you make mistakes, you have a knockback from a client, it's actually a culture where you get the support from your colleagues, and you're able to debrief on that knockback and setback and try and identify, well, what are the learnings here? What are the mistakes that are made, and how can we improve going forward? And that's the reason why those teams tend to perform better in the future, because they don't make the same mistakes over and over again. So that's that idea of psychological safety.
And I'm curious, Anna, because I think how sales teams are structured, especially with the remuneration, is counterproductive for trust and psychological safety. Like usually it's only according to your individual performance. So even if we say it's a sales team, it's more about like the individual performance, and that's how you get recompensated with a remuneration. And there is no like team KPIs per se. Like, are you seeing some sales team out there that, you know, they are compensated on the collective success, or it's more like per person?
Yeah, I was working with a team a couple of years ago who adopted that strategy. So they decided, against the way the rest of the organisation runs, that they actually decided to pool their incentives. So yes, there was sort of that individual component, but there was actually a greater incentive when the team performed as well. And so that was a way of them actually bringing on new people and getting people that were, you know, starting out in their careers to, I guess, have that support of those around them. But it was absolutely something that the rest of the team that had been long-standing had to agree to. But over the time, they've actually worked out that this enables all of them to succeed and to achieve even more as a team when the collective is growing. Interestingly, because of the choice that that team made and the outcomes that they were able to achieve, the rest of the organisation is actually starting to follow suit.
That's exciting.
Absolutely.
Because most of the time, you know, that's my perception of sales team. Competition is inside instead of competition maybe more like external.
Well, you'd hope that they don't have that competition amongst one another. They're probably more of those toxic teams that are probably the opposite, unfortunately, of that idea of trust and psychological safety.
Yeah, but definitely, I know the study you refer to about psychological safety. That's like the foundation for any high performing team to have. Definitely, that's the number one. So thank you. And how about going to the R of strong?
So resilience. So this is another biggie, but as I said, they're all equally as important. But I think resilience in particular, it's really the foundational element that sales teams need. Because as we've spoken about, salespeople face more knockbacks and setbacks than anyone else. By far, they experience so many more challenges. In particular, they've got the clients that might actually knock them back. But there's also that pressure that's felt from the top down of the organisation, as we spoke about. But there's also pressure at home. So the pressure doesn't stop when salespeople go home, which is unfortunate because a lot of their livelihoods actually are wound up in how successful they are. And so the pressure, certainly from the increases, in the cost of living are having that impact as well. And I know we're all facing that, of course, in our personal lives, but there's pressure there as well. So sales teams really need resilience to be able to cope well with those pressures. But I also take resilience one step further. So it is that ability to, bounce back, stay buoyant. There's a whole lot of those analogies that are thrown around as we define resilience. But I like to take it one step further. And there is research out there that suggests that we actually grow from those setbacks that we experience. So there's this idea of, it's spoken about as post-traumatic growth. And one of the leading researchers in that space is Lucy Hone, who comes out of New Zealand. So it's this idea that, yes, we might bounce back from a challenge, but we actually come away from challenges stronger and more developed in some way. So it's this idea that we actually grow as a result, or we learn something new, or we develop a skill. So we absolutely have to have resilience in our sales team, but I don't want to just think about it as going from, point A down to point B, then back to point A. I think we can actually go one step further and go to point C.
Even D. I would go even further.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think resilience is definitely a life skill that I guess, like, if you haven't heard about resilience, if you don't really look at what is resilience, get into it, because the world that we're living in, is a lot of uncertainty, rapid change. Resilience is a life skill, definitely. So now, how about optimism? Love it. I love the word.
This is probably my favorites, and I don't like to have favorites, but I reckon this one is, because optimism is probably one of the secrets of sales success, because a lot of salespeople don't realize that optimism is actually what helps them perform at their best. So studies have been done, back over the last couple of decades, that have actually uncovered that optimists outsell pessimists by almost 20 to 40%. And that's across a whole range of industries. And in some particular industries, it's even higher than that. So optimism is one of those hidden secrets. And optimism it does come down to the way we think, but there's more to it, because as we know, the way that we think has a direct impact on the actions we take and then the way we feel. And so because of the thoughts that we have, the actions that we take, and the way we feel, optimism tends to come with a whole lot of really, really great outcomes. So if you think about a sales environment, optimists are the ones that after, let's say the 99th phone call where you've had your 99th knockback, optimists are the ones that will keep picking up the phone. They will go for the 100th phone call thinking that this might be the one that they get the sale.
Yeah.
This differs from pessimists. So pessimists tend to be the ones that when they get to that 99th call, they think, you know what? The next one isn't going to be the one. This is useless. I'm not good at my job. The sale is never going to happen. And so they tend to give up, and they give up more easily. And so because of the way they think in that moment, they do act differently and they feel differently. So that's why they don't achieve great outcomes, or as many great outcomes as their counterparts. So optimism, because they continue and persevere even when it's tough, they get a whole range of great outcomes.
Correct. And I think as well there might be a correlation about performance. Like if you are not optimist and not resilient, like the result of not being optimist and not having this resilience, then you can be knocked down for weeks, months, without, maybe realizing it. And have you seen people going through that situation?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this particular environment, which is really tough for a lot of people, and in particular salespeople, I think, this is where we start to see, this play out a lot more. There will be the people that, do give up and it is too hard, but there are those that continue to persevere. They understand that it's a challenging environment. They realize, what hurdles they face, but hopefully they've got the resilience to be able to deal with those. And then they remain optimistic in their thought processes, so they will continue and they will persevere going forward as well.
What I'm seeing, like some people would use gamification, and that's helping them to stay on track,
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Gamification in what way?
For example, like, if you look at your example of like doing 100 calls, then you could have like two different jars, on your desk, and each time you get a no, then maybe you have like $1 in the no jar, and then each time you get a yes, you have like a $10 note, and then at the end of the week you can have a bit of a reward with whatever money is in the yes jar, and
Yeah.
maybe with the no jar you can offer something to one of your colleagues.
I like that. I like that a lot. Very cool. Nice.
So let's move on the next one, which is N, and I can't in fact really networks, is it?
It's networks. That's it. It's N for networks. So I guess this one ties in with the T, which is the trust and psychological safety element, where we need to consider the networks that we have around us. And again, this is where I challenge people not just to think about, the clients who they often put, first and foremost. It's also about considering, the team around you and certainly the broader organisation that might be supporting you, but also people external to the organisation. So it might be your business coaches or your mentors, or certainly, your loved ones as well. And here I really challenge people around the quality of the relationship they have. So we know that relationships are hugely important for us. So even our relationships are what help us become resilient, because we actually as a species wouldn't have even survived if we didn't have one another. And I'm talking back to the ancestors' days where we quite literally needed a pack to be able to survive those times. And these days, if we think about it, when we go through challenging times, we also call on others to support us. So we have people around there for that social support. So the relationships piece absolutely ties into resilience. Also, what we know about our relationships is that they help us to experience lots of positivity in our lives. So typically, if I was to ask people, what brings on positive emotions for them, they're probably going to recount something to me about the relationships that they have. So really important from that element. We also know that relationships, yes, they help us to feel good, but they also help us to function well. And they also contribute to our well-being. Relationships, they are probably the most important contributor to our well-being, if there was any that we had to choose. But those great outcomes only come when we have quality relationships. So there is a difference between a low and a high quality relationship. And so that's what we're talking about here, is that we actually need to be focused on high quality relationships. So these are the relationships that are built on things like respect. They're mutual. So we're both getting sort of those outcomes out of them as well. They're also, positive, in terms of, perhaps the energy that is sparked as a result of them. So the quality of our relationship actually has an impact on the outcomes that we achieve with them.
Now you say low and high. I can see how it's playing, for example, in my life, that yes, sometimes, I have like a conversation with someone, whether it's on the phone or face to face, and then I will think, how do I feel? Sometimes I am so tired, and sometimes I am so like excited and I want to do more in my life. And is that the thing? How people, like, if people ask you, like, by the way, guys, please ask any questions to Anna. I'm not the only one to ask any question. Remember, that's a rule here. So yeah, like, how would you define those low relationship and high relationship? Would that be another way of seeing it, or do you have other examples?
I do have a few examples, and in the book I actually use some particular titles or way of labeling these people. So I talk about the idea that you have energizers around you, right? So these are people that are positive. You are drawn to them because quite literally, as you said, Lizon, you are energized when you're around them. You walk away better than prior to that conversation. So that is someone that is energizing you. These differ from what I like to call drainers, right? There are those people around you that you probably avoid. You probably don't want to go and have a chat to them because being with them actually drains your energy.
Yeah.
So there is a clear distinction between those two. And ourselves, each of us, we actually have a choice as to the way that we turn up as well, knowing that the energizers are going to get a whole lot of other great outcomes as opposed to drainers. But it absolutely is a choice that I think we can all make as to who we want to be.
Yeah. Do you have any tips? Like, I want to be an energizer, but sometimes I'm very tired. Like, any tips to still be an energizer when you're tired?
Yeah, well, I think the first one is making sure that you are feeling good and functioning well. So we've got to put ourselves first all the time. But there are going to be those moments that we're more fatigued. And maybe that's when we don't choose to engage. So we choose to engage with others when we are at our best. Because emotions are contagious, okay? So
Correct.
the way that we show up is then going to have an impact on the people around us. And that's particularly important for leaders to know, because their mood is even more contagious on the rest of the team and has an even greater impact. The other issue or the challenge that comes about is that, yes, positivity is contagious. Negativity is also contagious, but it has a greater impact. So the intensity of it is far greater than positivity. So it actually ripples a lot more than the positive, unfortunately.
Yeah, someone is sharing that as well. When I'm done, I have to find somebody else can help, and then that's helping to come up also. Yes, true. So yeah, make sure you identify who are your energizer, but know that sometimes even energizer can feel down. So maybe have a few of those.
Absolutely. And what's been really interesting that's coming up a bit is also this idea of, I think in sales teams, there are sometimes what, Atlassian and Netflix will call these brilliant jerks. And this is this idea that someone can be amazing at their job and be delivering, big dollars to your sales team, but unfortunately they are that de-energizer, or they're probably someone that is quite toxic. And I know for a lot of leaders, that is really tough when you know how important that person is for your budgets, but you know how detrimental they are to the rest of the team. So I've been having a few conversations lately, interestingly, about firstly, do not hire those people. So, certainly look at, yes, the competencies of someone and the experience they have, but, think about their character. Is their character going to be something that's positive to your culture or negative? Yeah. And if that person is on your team, as hard as it is, you've got to get rid of them as quickly as possible, because over the long term, unfortunately, it's going to have some pretty bad consequences.
Yes. So just giving space for anyone watching it live to ask any question to Anna. And now we are going to, I think, the last one, which is goals and purpose.
Very good. So we'll get another meaty one. So there's a lot that sits behind this one. So goals and purpose, I mean, if I take the first one, goals makes a lot of sense. And particularly in sales environments, often our goals are really clear. So typically there is going to be a dollar figure that we need to go and achieve. But here I want to talk about goals that might be broader than that, and even connecting to things like, how do we achieve our purpose? And so both of these elements, in trying to pursue them, speak to the idea of motivation. And motivation is probably one of those resources, if you will, that a lot of salespeople want, but then certainly a lot of sales leaders want within their teams. They want their teams to be motivated to achieve their goals.
Yes. Motivation
Research is probably, again, one of my favorite parts, because I loved learning about this, about what actually motivates us. And what is really interesting is when I have done interviews with high-performing salespeople, I ask them what motivates them. Maybe surprising to some on the call or not, money doesn't come up. So money compensation is rarely shared. Typically what salespeople have told me what motivates them is more about them being the best. So them becoming the best salesperson that there is, or they're becoming a leader in their industry. So they're actually being recognized by others as being a really good performer. Or it's about having that idea of whatever they're doing is actually contributing to something greater than themselves. So the money is almost like a means to an end. So it actually helps them achieve more, perhaps for their families or for other important areas around them as well.
Anna, can I just do a parenthesis? So, because I think, you mentioned it, everyone is in sales, but still there is a stigma out there that, each time you are in a conversation with someone with a job title, sales. So maybe that's a good reminder to remind everyone that when you have a conversation with a salesperson, that of all those reasons, that there is like another meaning, purpose of why they are doing it. It's not only just for money. So it's just to remind other people out there that salespeople are also people, like everyone else, that have desire of being a good human being.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They are human after all. And there's a few things that I'll talk to that, because the first is the fact that sales isn't typically, it can be seen as a bit of a dirty word in some ways. It's one of those things that, like, children don't grow up going, hey, I want to be in sales. So it doesn't have that same appeal as medicine or law or something of the like. But it is a great industry, as we all know. The second part of that is that everyone is actually in sales. So there is a book sitting somewhere on that shelf up there by Dan Pink that says, to sell is human. So exactly to your point, Lizon, like, some people will have sales or distribution or something of the like in their title that will be explicit that they are in a sales role. But everyone is in sales. So that includes lawyers and doctors and architects and customer relations people. Anyone that is offering a service or a product or some sort of exchange of value is in a sales role. So maybe, again, as a bit of a news to people on the call, everyone is in sales. So here, when I'm talking about it, yes, I'm talking about the typical sales team, but knowing that each of these elements actually applies to every team and every person as well.
Yes, sorry, I did interrupt you.
No, that's all good.
But I just, because I can hear a lot of people like, sales is icky. Like, we have a lot of stigma around like sales and being in sales. And, I think maybe the biggest one is like when you want to buy a car, you go to a dealership and you don't want to talk to the salesperson, right? But now if we go back to goals and purpose, what else can you say about this one?
Yeah. So to come back to what drives all of us, what are those needs that we each have? Again, they are consistent typically across people. So the first, it comes down to our relationships. So again, one of the things that drives us and motivates us is actually being around good people. So we will do work that perhaps we don't always love, as long as we're actually in a good team. And I had some examples of that in a conversation with some people today that absolutely said that. They said, you know what, I don't actually love the work that much, but I love the team. So we have that.
I heard it.
Yeah, we have that need.
Yeah,
to feel connected to people. Also that sense of belonging, like, that is so important to us, to feel like we're part of something. And that is something that people can achieve in their work. So relationships are a big motivator for people. The second big motivator is feeling like you've got autonomy, so over your life or certainly over your work. Now, this is a big one at the moment. And again, seeing headlines yesterday about, places like ANZ, asking everyone to come back to the office 5 days a week is interesting from my perspective. And autonomy is about, the conversations at the moment are about having that flexibility in your role, perhaps where you work and how you do your work. But for some people, that's not possible. So for some people, they do need to be sitting on the phones or they're in the office. So autonomy for them will look different, and it looks different to everyone. So it could be when you start, when you go on your breaks, when you finish for the day. It might also be the type of work, so flexibility in the work that you do. And it also might be that flexibility in who you work with. So again, coming back to that idea of working with people you like. So there is that autonomy element that we all have as that need to feel like we have some sort of control. The third one relates back to competence. So again, another need that each of us has is to feel like we are constantly learning and developing so we can actually become masters of our roles. So we all want to feel that sense of competence. Now that can come from, formal things like going to uni and doing courses and the like those formal qualifications. Or it actually might be the opportunity to role shadow and to learn from others, or to have coaches and mentors around you as well. And of course, on the job training. But we all have that. So that idea of being competent. So there's sort of these three main drivers of what we call intrinsic motivation. So when we're motivated internally to do something because it's of pure enjoyment and interest to us, and money isn't spoken about there.
Yeah, and it's linked back to your S, where you share the notion of flow. Usually when we tap into the intrinsic motivation, we are in flow as well, they go hand in hand.
That's it, because we just do things because we love them. They are what we get out of bed each day because we are purely enjoy them and we're interested in them. The other thing that gets us out of bed each day is our purpose. And this is the one that I've added into this section. So in addition to those three needs that come from some of the motivation theories, I also like to include purpose, because I think purpose is a big driver in the reasons that we do get out of bed, and why we continue persisting with things that might be hard, or persisting during challenging times as well. So our purpose is almost like our northern light, like that guiding star that actually has a big impact on certainly, the career direction that we might take, like if that's aligned to our purpose. But then it also comes down to, what are the goals that we might have, if that's for the year or the quarter or whatever it might be. And it also should be something that dictates our daily actions. So our purpose should actually be something that sits with us all the time. And for a lot of people, they don't know what their purpose is. So again, that's a lot of work I do, where I ask people, what is meaning for you? Why do you get out of bed? What is it? And sometimes you've really got to peel off a lot of those layers of the onion to understand what really is the purpose for some people. But that is a massive driver.
Yeah. And it's funny because, it's not funny. But I'm also hearing that a lot, especially with executives. They maybe reach a certain level in their career, and then when we have a call as a coach, we realize, in fact, they don't know what their purpose is. They've been on autopilot for a few years, some of them decades, without knowing maybe why they were in this industry, why they were in this role, and not knowing. And now it's taking them a few years to unpack all of that and maybe align with who they are and all of that. So I think, we live in a society where it's really easy to forget what is our purpose and being unique as well.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's a big driver for people. Not a lot of people know what it is. And even at a greater level, what's an organization's purpose? So again, for some, a lot of them have figured that out, but for others, they still don't know what that is. And interestingly, when we can overlap or find our individual purpose and find that within our organization's purpose, that's actually when we get meaning in our lives, because we can see the connection of what brings us purpose through our organizations. I've got some great examples of groups that also lead through their purpose. So we've heard from Simon Sinek, start with why, and we see great examples of Apple and Tesla really leading with their purpose, and every single employee within the organization knows what that purpose is, and that's what drives them, and that's what drives them to perform.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, I've heard some great examples from places like AIA, where they've got a really clear purpose in what they were doing. And a lot of employees were drinking the Kool-Aid, and they were very much on board with the CEO's vision. And that is what has also led them to achieve some really great outcomes, knowing their purpose.
Yeah, I think, if we link all those notions, when the company is highlighting what is their mission, then it's attracting people that would tap that their intrinsic motivation would align with maybe the mission of the company. So maybe there is less need, in fact, to do some job crafting because there is a big alignment already that are made, in terms of relationship, that it's a match. Yeah. So less cost in hiring people, like getting new people. Maybe it's by doing this, it's more efficient for companies to align everyone in the organization. I think we had one question, so I'm gonna bring it. So it was when we were talking about the brilliant jerk, I guess.
How do you know if you employed a jackass? Yes, so it was a brilliant jerk is the terminology that I think Atlassian and Netflix employ. How do you know you've employed one? I reckon there's going to be some pretty clear signs. So firstly, if you've got that culture of psychological safety, your team is probably going to tell you that that person isn't great. But I think you can sense from them that, there's someone that might, not be very open. They keep things to themselves. They're not trustworthy. They might, encroach on your patch. They might speak badly of their teams or speak badly, in front of clients about people on their teams as well. So I think there's some really clear indicators of, who those brilliant jerks are. And, the hope would be that, there would be conversations happening about, potentially what's going on if you weren't visible to that. Let's say if you're the leader and you weren't really sure what's going on. Those conversations will happen if you've got that psychological safety present in your environment and certainly that trust with your colleagues as well.
Thank you, Anna. We have another one, but unfortunately, I'm not too sure what it is relating to. So if this person can, because we don't know the name, but if this person can tell us what do you refer to from our discussion, it will be great to let us know. So thank you. And do we already know what's going to be the title of the book coming next year?
Well, I mean, I've already revealed it because it's called Strong.
So that's the title. I didn't know it was the title. I'm going to bring it back. So that's the title of the book.
That's it. So it is focused on sales leaders. So it's all about how do sales leaders lift the engagement of their people, achieve better results, and thrive in the process. So the idea is that absolutely we can go and achieve, high performance, which so many organizations are after. But I want people to be a bit more ambitious. I mean, I think that's not enough for me. I would much rather that we actually achieve much greater results. So things like, imagine if we could have our teams really engaged, that they are at their best at each day. What about also if we could help them be resilient and we can help them be well in the process so they're actually more able to thrive? I think, I haven't heard too many groups to date talk about this idea of their strategy being about creating a thriving organization. I hear a lot more focused on that high performance element. And high performance to me was introduced probably almost a decade ago when I was, working in the corporate sector. And, it was launched with huge fanfare and it was the strategy that we adopted. And it's certainly a lot of the strategy that many organizations adopt. But as we've sort of started to allude to, there are some challenges with it. I also think we need to be more ambitious. I think it's, not enough to strive for. And I think there's a lot more as leaders and organizations that we should want for our people and for our teams. And that's why I think we should go for thriving instead. I also think it might be a competitive advantage to others if they could actually talk to people, to their teams, and then certainly, potential recruits about where their focus is as well.
Thank you. So make sure you follow Anna on LinkedIn, and maybe from her website you can get access to the newsletter. Just coming back, so from this question we have, do you think is Karina? So it's the alignment between purpose and goals.
Okay. So do you think this was currently managed well? What are the challenges around this? So trying to decipher, is that about how the purpose is delivered to the teams, the alignment between purpose and goals? Okay. So so I think I've seen good examples of organizations where they very much have that mission or that vision, which is probably their purpose. And then the teams have those goals that probably sit underneath that should be aligned then back to that purpose and what we're trying to achieve. So if that is done well, then absolutely a great motivator for people. I think you've got to start with that purpose, because people want to understand why they're showing up to work today, why they're putting in that effort. It's got to be a purpose that is greater than all of you, and is something that is having that positive contribution to something bigger than you as well. And then the goals should stem down from that. So yeah, I've seen it done well, but I think it fails when that vision or that purpose isn't clear, or it's not congruent with actually what it is that the organisation is trying to achieve. A good question.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll come to an end. So if you have any more questions, please pop them now into the chat. And so Anna, let me think of a last question. I just try to be original on that one, because usually I kind of ask the same question. So I just want to do a pattern interrupt with my questioning. So would you write more than one book?
Oh yeah. The other books are already in the mind. So the focus here specifically has been on sales leaders, so people that are leading sales teams. The next one naturally will be for the sales professionals, so those that potentially aren't leading a team, but are still obviously looking to achieve great outcomes. And then I might even start to talk about sales organisations as a third book as well. I've also been asked by my lawyer clients and my architect clients and my teacher clients, and they've said, well, where's our book? So it sounds like book 4, 5, and 6 are also there as well. I guess a note about that is that the book is targeted at sales leaders, but as we've spoken about, anyone is in sales and anyone can be a leader, because as we know, it's a decision that we can all make. So the book is still, going to be valuable to anyone that picks it up.
Okay, so look out for Strong next year.
Absolutely.
And so would LinkedIn be the best way? Do you have any link to share with anyone?
Yes, so absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. And then in addition to, if you go to my website, which is annaglynn.com.au, you can also sign up to my newsletter, where I sort of regularly share tips and ideas and strategies around actually how we help our people and performance to thrive.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Anything else you want to share with us today?
No, my pleasure. It's been great being here. I've loved the conversation. I've loved sharing more of this research that hopefully can help other people in some way. So I hope people are taking away some new ideas that they can implement themselves, or certainly with their teams as well.
Yeah, thank you. We were very grateful that you went on this show, and we wish you all the best, and we will look for Strong next year. So thank you, Anna. Bye for now.
Thank you. See you, everyone.